r/NoSleep. Posted by CIAHerpes. I found the bottomless pit from the Book of Revelation. There were rules to survive. Part 2. The fated, ancient sign for the town seemed to point down a smaller branching corridor to our left. There were no gems or high caverns on this path. It seemed like some ancient civilization had carved the narrow corridor out of the stone itself. A path a few feet wide stretched out in front of us, going totally straight as far as the eye could see. "Which way?" Bear asked. Stephanie looked excitedly down the path to Bloodstone, population 144,000, at least if I believed the sign. "Obviously towards the town. We don't know where this main tunnel leads. It could just go on forever. If there's a town, there's people," she said. "There's no goddamn town down here," I said. "Are you nuts? Who would live down here in the darkness?" She shrugged. We walked for hours down the carved stone trail to Bloodstone. It went straight the entire way, until it started to open up. The ceiling and walls expanded until, within a few minutes, we found ourselves in an enormous cavern. There were doors and empty windows carved into the rock. Even the ladders were made from stone. I saw hundreds of these ancient homes, stacked one on top of another. A pale face peeked around the corner, its massive black eyes practically bulging out of its head. "Hey, wait," I said as the creature turned and ran away. It looked vaguely human in its general body shape, but extremely pale, hairless and with much larger eyes. I wondered if these were some strange offshoot of the human species, lost souls who had gotten caught down here thousands of years ago and had evolved to survive in these harsh conditions. It sprinted away, webbed feet slapping hard against the slippery rock trail sloping upwards through the center of these endless carved-out empty houses. Within seconds, I had lost it. It sprinted forwards like a greyhound, far faster than any two-legged creature should be able to run. I heard the wet smacking of its giant webbed feet receding into the distance, saw its long, mutant hands flying back and forth in time with its stride. A gunshot rang out. I kept running towards where I had seen the creature last. I saw a man in a black Kevlar vest and camouflage pants pointing a smoking AR-15 down at the writhing humanoid's head. An exit wound the size of a grapefruit emerged from the back of its chest. It began to spit bright red blood onto its pale skin, its large, black eyes rolling in pain and terror. The man pulled the trigger again and the back of the humanoid's skull disintegrated, a waterfall of brain matter and dark blood streaming out beneath it. It started to form a spreading puddle on the cold stone. "Hey," I cried out, shocked. "It's a person." He looked up suddenly. I saw he had tanned, almost golden skin and very dark eyes. His face and head looked freshly shaved. His entire demeanor screamed military or perhaps a hired gun. He pointed the rifle at us. "Put your hands up," he said slowly. He had a strange accent that sounded vaguely Caribbean, but I couldn't place it. We all put our hands up slowly, though I saw Bear's fingers twitch as if he wanted to go for his pistol. "Where did you come from?" "Death Valley," I said. "Of course. Where did you enter?" He paused, looking at us for a long moment. "Don't worry about me," he said. "What's your name?" We introduced ourselves. He grunted. "You all need to turn around. My agency is currently doing excavations in this area, and we don't need civilians running around. It's bad enough we have these things crawling everywhere." He pointed to the white, mutated corpse bleeding at his feet, emitting a rank smell of shellfish and coppery blood. "Is that the Mark of Cain?" Bear asked. "We were told to watch out for something called the Mark of Cain." The man laughed. "The Mark of Cain looks nothing like this. Those with the mark lose all their skin. It just peels away. Hard bones start to grow over their bodies. They grow black veins throbbing with poison all over the outside of their faces, arms and chests, and their eyes and mouths turn a rotten, sickly shade of green. You will know the Mark of Cain instantly. Their blood is poison, and they are almost impossible to kill. They have regenerative properties from whatever strange chemicals flow through their black blood. No, the Mark of Cain is much uglier than these poor idiots. These creatures are just inbred descendants of some long-lost race. We call them the Fishmen, for obvious reasons." Looking at the webbed feet and hands and the slimy, bone-white skin, I could see why they would name them that. They even gave off a fishy, salty odor as if the smell of a faint ocean breeze blew through the passageway. "What agency do you represent?" I asked. The man paused for a long moment, looking like he was thinking hard about the answer. He opened his mouth. "Well, it depends who," he started to say. A resonation began to sound, cutting him off. At first I thought it was an earthquake sending off echoing cacophonous vibrations through the cavern, but as it grew louder, I could hear the shrieking, harmonizing notes of some massive trumpet. Rocks started to fall all around us, first just small pebbles from cracks in the ceiling and walls and then larger and larger stones. I saw the soldier spin away from us and begin running towards one of the houses carved into the stone. I tried calling him, but I couldn't even hear myself scream in the din of the deafening trumpets. With my adrenaline spiking, I motioned for Bear and Stephanie to follow. Without looking back to see if they would, I started sprinting towards the same house the soldier had entered. I did not want to lose the one person who might know what's going on. The trumpet cut out as suddenly as it had begun. I heard the heavy thudding of many booted feet behind us. I glanced back quickly and saw dozens more soldiers, all armed with AR-15s and bulletproof vests. They screamed something at the soldier I followed, but my ears rang so loud I could only see their mouths moving as if from a silent movie. I figured it was something along the lines of, "What do we do?" But by then the second trumpet blast had sounded. My ears rang as the soldiers' mouths moved, yet it was as if no sound came out. Bear, Stephanie and I got inside the carved chamber as the second and much shorter trumpet blast cut off. The last ringing vibrations disappeared down the endless tunnels. For a long moment, nothing happened. The soldiers continued to run towards us, screaming and asking for orders. I heard a hissing sound, as if a gas main had been cut. A suffocating, chemical smell began to fill the cavern. I took a deep breath and held it. A sense of rising pressure seemed to fill the air. Then the ground outside the house erupted with fire, like a hydrogen bomb going off. Clear blue flames shot up in the center of the tunnel floor. I heard a whooshing sound as the inferno spread. Long tongues of flame rose, licking the stone walls. The men stopped in their tracks, their uniforms immediately starting to catch fire, their skin liquefying and falling off in molten drops. Their mouths opened in a silent scream. I could hear the sizzling of their bodies, like bacon grease spitting out of a hot pan. They danced, jumping from foot to foot, their arms punching at the air. In a matter of seconds, I saw all their clothes disappear into smoking ashes, blowing away from their bodies in the slight wind that blew through the cave. I felt no heat at all standing on the stone floor of the ancient house, but I smelled the burning hair and searing meat of their melting bodies. Within a few more seconds, only blackened skeletons stood there, the grinning skulls still looking in our direction before they collapsed to the smoking stone floor. The fire disappeared as quickly as it had started. The boiling blue flames seemed to suck back into the earth itself. Bear and Stephanie looked at our new companion with horror-struck faces. He did not look nearly as perturbed as I would have thought, seeing his entire company wiped out. He simply shook his head. "Blackwater keeps sending us rookies," he said, giving us a half-smile. "They gotta learn somehow, right?" We learned that the man's name was Agent Garland. He was vague on why he was down there with hired goons. We hadn't talked for more than a minute when we heard a strange wailing coming through the town. Everyone went deathly quiet immediately. Agent Garland's eyes went wide and he started breathing fast. I looked out the threshold, peering to the right, the direction we had come, and seeing nothing but a smooth stone passageway. Stephanie stood on my other side. I heard her gasp. I turned my head to the left and immediately knew what had scared her. It looked like thousands of black silhouettes slithering and limping and twisting down the road, coming closer and closer to us. I saw pure ebony shadows in the shape of venomous snakes dozens of feet long. Others had 2 legs and 2 arms like a man, but their limbs looked as thin as sticks and their bodies stood 20 feet high. Their faces were expressionless, like a black ski mask with no holes for the eyes or mouth. The wailing grew closer, more insistent. It sounded like a mother broken with grief over the death of her children, a kind of hysterical shrieking that only amplified in the massive cavern. It bounced off the ceiling a dozen stories above our heads, echoing and distorting. Stephanie and Bear screamed behind me. Rivers of sweat ran down my face. "There was a rule about this," I yelled, barely hearing myself over the wailing. Stephanie and Bear continued to look at me with wide, staring eyes. Agent Garland simply smiled, waiting. I tried to remember the list of rules. Though this happened years ago, I remember the panic that set in as my mind drew a blank. There was too much stress, too much going on around me. I couldn't focus or think clearly. I took a deep breath and cleared my mind. In an instant, my subconscious started spitting up pieces of the rules. I remembered slowly. The rules discussed not looking at the face of a baton, getting off the main path if the trumpet sounded, something about the angel of death, killing people with the Mark of Cain and... It came to me in a flash. The rules had said something about shadows attacking us through our eyes. "Close your eyes," I screamed as loudly as I could. The wailing was right outside the empty stone threshold now. Without looking to see if my friends had heard, I slammed my eyes shut and waited, counting the beats of my thudding heart. The wailing cut off suddenly. I felt a presence standing directly next to me and heard a low, guttural moaning. Something cold gently caressed my back and arms before rising to my cheek. Soft footsteps fell all around us, a sound as light as tall grass blowing in a breeze. Hissing and a deep, choked gurgling erupted from something behind me. I felt more and more cold tendrils and hands pressing against my skin. A sense of rising pressure surrounded my body. I felt like screaming, my skin crawling. I tried to pull away, but I was surrounded on all sides by the grasping alien hands. They disappeared all at once with the sound of a massive balloon popping. I heard Bear slowly exhaling behind me. Agent Garland laughed. My heart beat a frenzied, runaway rhythm that pounded in my ears. "Okay, it's been 30 seconds, Bear said, sounding out of breath. "You can open your eyes." We decided to rest and have a meal in the house. The stress of nearly dying twice had done a number on us psychologically. I felt totally drained. I would have liked to lay down and rest. We had traveled for many hours. My feet screamed at me with throbbing blisters and waves of sharp pain. "So what are you going to do now?" I asked Agent Garland as I pulled out sardines and crackers. I tore into them ravenously, chugging a couple of bottles of Gatorade as I ate. "Can you get us out of here?" "I'm not really in charge of this mission," he said without meeting my gaze. He shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. "The main group is down far below us. You would have to ask the commander." "What are they doing down there?" Stephanie asked, her curiosity piqued. "Is there something important for national defense?" Agent Garland smiled. "There's something important for everything," he said, a cynical gleam reflecting off his face. "God lives down there. He's kept locked up by the angels because... Well, I shouldn't be the one who has to tell you this, but God has gone totally insane. He gave a large part of his mind to create the universe, and now he's slowly dying down there, like the serpent eating its own tail. We're actually in his body right now, walking through these tunnels of a bottomless pit. Those fires and shadow creatures are like immune cells, trying to kill all trespassers. Only those with the sign of heaven on their foreheads don't get targeted." "What's the sign of heaven?" I asked. He waved his hand at that. "Nothing you need to worry about, because you won't be getting it. Only the angels have the sign," he said. "It's like a white, pulsing symbol on their foreheads. It kind of looks like a backward 7 with a slashing diagonal line through it. I don't know what language it is or what it means. The angels are not exactly conducive to talking. They're more likely to kill you on sight." Agent Garland got up, stretching and sighing. "Well, this has been fun, but I have to meet up with the main group and report the casualties. It's not the first time, and it won't be the last. But there's always so much goddamn paperwork." He pointed his index finger at the still smoldering bones accusingly. I saw only tiny fragments remaining now. The fine gray ashes blew in the light breeze down the tunnel. The cave not only cremates people, I thought with a hint of hysteria, it even spreads their ashes for them. Almost like a loving family member. I shuddered. Agent Garland started walking out without a backwards glance. I jumped up. "Wait," I said. Bear and Stephanie joined in my chorus of yelling, their hysterical voices rising in a frenzy. "You can't just leave us here. Do you at least know the way out?" "The way out," he responded, still walking away, "is further in. If you find the center, you'll find the exit. There are many paths in, but only one out. So it is, and so it has always been." And with that cryptic message, Agent Garland disappeared around the corner. I wondered if I would ever see him again. After a minute of discussion, we decided to follow in Agent Garland's tracks. We hoped that if he was heading down into the deeper levels, the center where he claimed God lived, that we could simply tag along and get the hell out of this madhouse. And yet no matter how fast we walked, we couldn't catch a glimpse of him. I didn't know if there were secret tunnels somewhere in the thousands of stacked stone houses of Bloodstone, but if there were, we had a snowball's chance in hell of just finding one of them randomly. "This is bullshit," Bear said gruffly, sweating heavily again. He sulked like an angry child, fingering his holstered gun. We headed deeper into Bloodstone. It looked like it had once been a marvelous city. It had ancient stone posts where lamps used to burn. In the center of street intersections, beautiful statues of angels loomed over the deadland. The caverns opened up above us more and more. After it had risen hundreds of feet, our flashlights lost sight of it. The headlamps simply would not pierce into the darkness that deeply. "These look like the statues Michelangelo did," Stephanie observed, looking at a heavily muscled angel in a robe ripping open the jaws of a massive serpent. The angel's stone wings hung out behind it, long projections that dwarfed its body. but it looked different from the statues of angels I had seen. Its wings looked much more reptilian, like the wings a dragon might have. They had bat-like webbing between the pointed bones that ran out in a graceful curve to spikes. And its eyes had a sheen of cruelty and arrogance that came through even in the carving. I pointed this out to Bear and Stephanie. They looked slightly unnerved by the observation. Well, who's to say that the descriptions of angels done by ancient artists have any relevance to reality? Stephanie said. They could look reptilian, or could be made of light, or they could be totally extraterrestrial and incomprehensible. Humans only base observations of life on what they see on Earth, but they can't comprehend what other forms life could take. Maybe these angels aren't even from our planet. I thought about it. What she said made a lot of sense. No, there's no way evolution would make such a similar creature to a human being, Bear said, speaking for the first time. I jumped slightly. These angels look like people with wings to a large extent. So either people and angels evolved from a common ancestor, or people were made in the image of angels, or, I'm saying that these statues might not be what the angels actually look like, Stephanie said. Oh, yeah, okay, Bear said, returning to his sullen state. He continued to keep his hand on the holstered pistol, nervously looking left and right. I felt it too, there was a feeling of being watched. We continued to walk through the streets of Bloodstone. I caught glimpses of what I assumed were what Agent Garland called the fishmen, white, pale faces with large, black eyes. They were extremely fast, and by the time I even glimpsed one out of the corner of my eye, it had gone. But they didn't bother us. They seemed content with just watching us pass. Maybe they were more afraid of us than we were of them. We had entered a different part of the city with graceful towers that extended far up into the darkness when we encountered the first creature with the evil deformity called the Mark of Cain. These remind of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, Stephanie observed as Bear smoked a cigarette, trailing behind us. I looked up the architecture with admiration. The ground floor of the massive stone tower had dozens of archways leading in, almost like a spider's compound eyes looking out on the abandoned city. These ancient people must have been powerful to build all this, I said. Do you think they tunneled it out of? A soft sound interrupted me, but in the silence, it came out jarring. I heard a choked, gurgling laughter. It was a soft sound that quickly faded to nothing, like a man with a slit throat trying to laugh in his final moments. But I could tell from the way Stephanie and Bear froze that we had all heard it. Bear took out his gun and spun to face the threat. A tall, twisted figure slid silently out of one of the shadowy archways of a nearby tower. Its head nearly scraped the top of the threshold, a height of nearly 10 feet. As our headlamps illuminated the newcomer, I saw a face straight from the wildest nightmares of a delirium tremens patient. The description Agent Garland had given us of the Mark of Cain paled in comparison to its true horror. It looked like its face had somehow flipped inside out. It had no skin or eyelids or hair anywhere. The bony, off-white skeletal plates on its forehead joined with raised cracks running across its scalp like ugly scars. Two eyes shone out with a shade of green that reminded me of putrefying infection and fetid swamps. They glowed with their own inner light. Dark, twisting veins ran like the slash marks across its entire body, throbbing with each beat of its alien heart. They writhed like fat worms, a rapid, quivering pulse passing through them every few moments. The creature's strange, green eyes glowed brighter with excitement and bloodlust. It had no lips, just sharp bones that met in a line. When its mouth was closed, I couldn't see any sign of it. But as its plated legs sprinted with powerful strides towards us, it opened its mouth in a silent scream. I saw its jaw unhinge like a snake's, falling down to its chest. More sickly green light flooded out, illuminating the entire street with its fetid illumination. As it got to within 20 feet of us, I saw that deep cracks ran through the rest of its body, zigzagging in small, tight lines like black stitches. Bear fired. It rang through the rocky cavern with a blast like a cannon firing. I saw the first bullet smash into the creature's face. Part of its skeletal face blew apart, the cheek shattering like ceramic. In a frenzy of bullets, Bear pulled the trigger again and again in the space of a second. The abomination's kneecaps and shin bones were covered in white, bony plates, almost reminding me of some ancient gladiator's protective uniform. But the large caliber bullets of the pistol blew the legs of the creature apart in a flash of bone splinters and black blood. The smell of gunsmoke filled the air. I also noticed a subtler but still somewhat foul stench that reminded me of sulfur and campfire smoke. It emanated from the creature's body. With an ear-splitting shriek like a steam whistle exploding, its open green mouth erupted with cyclonic whirls of green light. A piece of the light spun off from the bubbling, frothing mass streaming from its mouth. The piece looked like some sort of floating cloud of ball lightning about the size of a basketball. It came at us like a cannonball from hell, blurring through the air. Rippling currents of electricity sizzled and popped as it spun, flying straight at Stephanie's head. An overwhelming odor of ozone followed it. Bear sprinted towards Stephanie. I saw it happen as if in slow motion. He tackled Stephanie to the cold stone ground. The ball lightning flew over her head and missed her by mere inches. As she fell, her hair flew up. A flash erupted as the ball lightning touched a lock of it. That part of her hair erupted into blue flames and disappeared without leaving ashes or smoke. The abomination dragged itself across the ground like a possum with a snapped spine, still emanating its steam whistle shriek. Its eyes and mouth flashed brighter and the black veins pulsed faster. A moment later, another ball of green lightning shot out. The way it rolled off the larger mass of light reminded me of how vendors at the carnival swirled cotton candy around a paper cone. It bristled, shivering with its own trembling energy. Then it flew at me. I stood amazed as it curved through the air, this new death sensation that shone with a cancerous green light.